So we have looked at Milgram's study and we have looked at factors that affect obedience. And this is an exam question with a STEM based on factors affecting obedience. So 6 marks using your knowledge of research into social influence and Milgram's variations suggest why such changes in obedience may have been linked to uniform. You must refer to the case study in your answer. Okay, so what we're going to look at today is further explanations of obedience. And there's 2 that we need to look at, and it's agentic state and legitimacy of authority. Legitimacy of authority is whether someone that's in a position of authority seems like they should be there. If an authority figure is more legitimate, you're more likely to obey them. If they are less legitimate, you are less likely to obey them. So in Milgram's study, Mr. Williams wearing a white coat provided a legitimacy to his authority. And an agentic state is where you believe you are acting on behalf of somebody else and you are not personally responsible for your actions. So a good example from Milgram's original study was the verbal prods that Mr. Williams used. So Mr. Williams used the verbal prods to reassure the participants that he was in charge, that he would take responsibility, and they were just acting on behalf of him. So legitimacy of authority and agentic state. And these 2 explanations are referred to as social psychological explanations. So if you read through your booklet on page 33 and complete the task on page 1, using as much reference to the procedure and findings as possible, you could include Bickman's research on uniform. You could include Hoffling's study on nurses as well. And page 27 of the textbook will help you construct one further evaluation paragraph. On page 34, there's a task about the agentic state. Again, it's linking this to Milgram's study. And page 27 of the textbook, again, will help you construct one further evaluation paragraph. An agentic shift. So in everyday life, people have 2 ways of acting. They can either act in an autonomous state where they are responsible for their own behavior, or they can act as an agentic state where they allow someone else to direct their behavior. So if you are in an autonomous state, you're responsible for your own actions, or you feel responsible. If you are in an agentic state, you feel that someone else is responsible for your actions. You are just acting on behalf of them. People move from an autonomous state into an agentic state when they're confronted with an authority figure and they are obeying that authority figure. And this change is called an agentic shift. So when you change from autonomous to agentic, that movement is called an agentic shift. If we obey an order that goes against our conscience, we're likely to experience moral strain, which happens when we have to do something we believe to be immoral, but when we believe that we have to act on behalf of somebody else, like giving the electric shocks in Milgram's study. And although people in such a situation want to stop, they feel unable to do so due to binding factors. So aspects of a situation that allow someone to minimize the damaging effect on their behavior. So in Milgram's study, the verbal prods act as binding factors. So an autonomous state is our normal state where we take responsibility for our own actions. An agentic state is where we feel like we're acting on behalf of somebody else and they're responsible for any consequences. And when we move from an autonomous state into an agentic state, we're doing this through an agentic shift. So we can link this back to Milgram's study. So in terms of the agent in Milgram's study is going to be Mr. Williams. So you're acting on behalf of the experimenter. The binding factors are going to be the verbal prods, and the teacher believed that they're obeying a legitimate authority figure because Mr. Williams had the white coat and he was in Yale University. So if we are asked to give examples of these social psychological factors, the agent is the experimenter, Mr. Williams. The binding factors, the verbal prods that Mr. Williams used, and the legitimacy of authority is Mr. Williams in his white coat. So there is this multiple choice activity on page 35 in your booklet. Pause it before I go through the answers. And the 2 answers for this are B and E. And this is a 3-mark exam question on legitimacy of authority. In terms of evaluating this, there is research support. You can also use the argument of a situational versus a dispositional explanation. So all the stuff we've looked at so far seems to be situational. It's something about the environment. Someone's disposition is their personality. So you can compare it to dispositional explanations, which is the next subtopic here. And also it's an example of environmental determinism. So it's saying that you have a lack of free will. If you feel like you're in an agentic state, you are less likely to take responsibility for your own actions. Derren Brown's The Push is something good to watch to try to see how agentic state and legitimacy can be applied to this example. In your booklet, there is a 16-mark question: outline and evaluate 2 explanations for obedience. So that is legitimacy and agentic state. You would need to define the 2 explanations for your AO1, and then for your AO3, use research support. So most likely use Milgram, but you can use any study, and then add some extra AO3 points in there. And that is what we have been through.